Any fucking time now. Hey, there we are. Hey, everybody. I went live like a minute and a half ago. It took forever to actually go live tonight, but here we are. Art, how are you doing? And hello to all my lurkers out there tonight, whoever you are. Let's get right into the feeding. We are going to actually be talking quite a bit about the pond tonight, and we're going to be doing some experiments in the pond tonight as well. But I'll give everybody a chance to show up and get a little bit of people here before I start talking about it. In the meantime, we can go ahead and get everybody fed. All right, look how big this bastard's getting. That thing is huge. Because that is getting so huge, I've been looking at it, and I don't really think we need this giant piece of wood in here. It looks beautiful, but it really does take up a lot of space. And we got another big piece of wood down here that I may either move if we get this out, or maybe take them both out. I want some woodwork in the tank, but I guess it's not necessary. But I'm beginning to think that those fish are getting big enough that they don't need a giant obstacle with like sharp pointy bits all over it right in the middle of their increasingly smaller pond. All right, Mike, how are you? Steve, you're driving. And you don't have to watch the video I sent you, Steve. I just thought about you because it popped up in my feed while I was listening. Well, I listened to it actually, but I did think about you, so I sent it to you. I know how much you love the fake version of that song, so I sent you the real one. And even the real one that I'm talking about, I think is might even be a cover of an older one. There's a lot of songs out there like that. You think you know the original one from 1975, only to find out that that's a cover from some 1950 song, only later to find out that that's actually a cover from some 1930s gospel song or something. So nothing in the world's ever new. TK, how are you doing? I can't decide whether I want to toot my own horn tonight or not. I probably will, because you all know me, or at least those of you who've been around for a while know me. False modesty is not one of my faults. But you will notice that the pond is a lot clearer than it was last time you saw it. And that was just Wednesday on my members live stream. I was in there. We had a whole conversation about the pond and why the water was getting cloudy and so on and so forth. And so now you see that it is not. And so I think I figured out what was going on. And again, didn't really think about, again, this is where I'll be tooting my own horn. Like, I'm getting so good at this shit. It's just intuition now. I don't really have to think about it anymore. I just say, yeah, that's probably what needs to happen. And then that was the problem, and everything's happening. So the pond was getting cloudy. And I thought at first that because the fish are getting so big, it was just more detritus building up, and the cloudiness looked more like just stuff swirling around in the water, just muddy water, so to speak. And so I know I filtered it not long ago, and I used to be able to go quite a while between filterings. And when I came down in the morning, the tank was always crystal clear. But by the afternoon, it looked kind of like muddy-ish water. The fish have been swimming around all day, stirring the bottom up. And so I decided I would filter it again. And I ran several cycles of filter pads through there, and I really wasn't getting that much physical material out of the pond, despite stirring the water up and swirling it all around. And I'm also noticing that when I come down in the morning, it already looks like that, even when the fish have been sleeping all night for the most part. It still had that sort of muddy water look. And so I decided it definitely was cloudy water as opposed to muddy water, which there's a difference. Um, and so I thought about what to do. At first, I was going to experiment with like increasing the biological um, capacity of the tank. I was going to make a like a biofilter, not a sponge filter. I was going to make it out of ceramic rings and an air stone. And my first iteration of it didn't work. And I quickly realized why it didn't work. That's what we're actually going to experiment with a little bit tonight, because I'm also going to be making a nitrate reactor here in the fairly near future. I think tomorrow I'm going to go pick up the supplies I need. And we're going to see if we can build a nitrate reactor and finally achieve the fabled denitrification. We'll have a whole lengthy conversation about that probably tonight at some point. Anyway, I thought about I need to bump up the biologicals on this tank. And the more I thought about it, the more, again, if you know me, I always go for simple. And then if that doesn't work, we can get layers of complication more. But let's start with the easiest, most simplest thing to do. And when I thought about the tank, it does have a lot of bioload in it. And there's clearly enough oxygen in the water for the fish to thrive. But with that much waste, it really needs a lot of oxygen to rapidly break down the waste. And I began to think that maybe that's what I was seeing was waste in the water more so than biological cloudiness. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain what I mean. Again, this is just sort of intuition I'm going with. And I decided that, if you look at the tank, there's not a lot of surface activity. I do have water that comes out of a pump and it flows down like a sluice inside of a hollow log. You can't see it anymore because it's all overgrown, but there is a hollow log in there. And as the water runs down that, it splashes and burbles and goes into the pond. And you can see it carries some bubbles back to the surface with it. And my assumption was that's plenty of surface agitation and oxygenation. And for the fish, it is. But for the bioload, I'm asking this thing to process. I began to think that I just don't have enough gas exchange going on in this tank. I need to get the waste gases out faster, and I need to replenish the used up oxygen more quickly. Remember, an air stone does not add oxygen per se. It simply allows the tank to absorb more oxygen if it needs it. And so I put an air stone in there rather than a biological filter. And it's been 2 days since I put the air stone in, and you can already see the difference. So I think that was the trick. I think I needed to just aerate the water more, give it better gas exchange. I started out with a standard air stone, but I bought a new air pump today. I got it from Walmart for $14. It goes up to a 60-gallon tank. And I put, let's see if I can reach it down here. Where is it? I put the whole entire bar in there. So, not real vigorous bubbles, but lots of them. And that's what I want. I want just a bunch of bubbles popping at the surface. And I've also got it laying on the bottom underneath of where the waterfall flows in. So we're going to get maximum, distribution of that oxygenated or, gas exchanged water. And so I just did that this morning. And considering the change we've already seen in the last 36 hours from just a single air stone with a small pump on there, I think another day or two, and I'll be back to having nice crystal clear water. And if that doesn't work, like I said, I can go to the next step and simply put a small sponge filter in there. And the sponge filter would give me both the gas exchange and more biological filtration. And so if this, simple air stone by itself doesn't clear the tank up, then I think the sponge filter will absolutely clear it up. The issue is not physical detritus. It's not that the tank doesn't, isn't filtered. We're just, the fish are getting so damn big. We're getting to the point where the biologicals aren't able to keep up with the bioload that's going on in the tank. And so it's time to make some adjustments to, correct for the disparity now. So that's the one thing I kind of figured out intuitively without really testing or doing anything, just standing kind of thinking about it and thinking, why would it look like this? And just, I understand how aquariums work well enough now that I can just stand and think about it and generally come up with what's going on. My pond outside was having issues with foamy water, and I did a 90% water change on it. At the time, there was no fish in it. I just had a frog living in there and a bunch of bugs and stuff. Tons of biologicals on the bottom, leaves and stuff. The water looked like coffee rather than tea. And I just kept getting this foam on top. And the only reason you get foam like that is if you've got too much proteins in your water. And I just couldn't figure out where proteins were coming from or why I would have proteins in the water. I also did the huge water change and I still started getting foam on the top of it again. And I still can't explain why this worked. But again, just intuitively, I thought this pond is just, it's not a properly functioning pond. It's missing the element of having the fish in there to sort of complete the whole cycle. And so I caught those fish. I caught a few minnows, threw them in there, and it's been less than a week that they've been in there, maybe 5 or 6 days that they've been in there. And all of that foamy stuff is just gone. I've done nothing else to the pond other than put those fish in there, and the foamy stuff cleared up. So I don't know why I was right, but I was right. I knew sort of intuitively that just doing that would clear that problem up, and it worked like a champ. Same thing recently with my polypterus tank. I was getting the cloudy water in there, and I decided that it was lacking in circulation. And all I did was add a small air, not an air stone, a small circulation pump in there. And within a week and a half, 2 weeks, that water was completely cleared up. And to this day, it's still crystal clear in there. So that's all it needed was a little bit of circulation, and that cleared up the issue. So it's usually not complicated when you're having problems, and the solution to them usually isn't particularly complicated either. Did I say hi already, Janice? Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it does. It really looks a lot cleaner. The new fish are doing well as far as I can tell. The rainbow fish I got is just, he's ancient. I mean, you can just look at him and see that he's the fish version of a very old man. And so he's swimming around, looks normal, swimming with the other fish. He's feeding well. But again, I really don't anticipate him living that long, just because of the actuarial tables. Death takes us all at some point. And the angelfish actually is starting to like perk up and look really good. And an angelfish can live 10 to 15 years without too much issue. And he said once again that the angelfish is probably pushing about 10 years old. So might get several more years out of the angelfish. You never know. But it's definitely starting to color back up and swim around. It's swimming around with its dorsal fin, nice and perky. So it looks good. I'm happy with it. Let me go find a lighter, and I'm going to do this bong hit. We're going to do a little bit of work on the pond tonight. Like I said, we're going to do some experimenting. We'll talk about that when we get to it, what I'm actually going to be experimenting with. And I need to trim up my dragon's tongue plant. And I asked my wife, and she said she does want some cuttings from it. So I'll be saving some of that tonight. And I don't think I'm just going to throw it in the pond like I normally do and let the goldfish eat it. It's a good way to get rid of it, except they don't eat the stems. And every time I do it, within a few days, I spend the next week picking stems out of the pump that are clogging it up, and they get like deep inside it, and I got to spend 5 minutes in there digging pieces of it out to get the water flowing again. So I've learned it's just not worth it to throw the dragon's tongue in the pond. I know the goldfish love it, but what don't they love? They'll eat any damn thing I throw in there. So they can make do with their goldfish food, and I'll throw the plant cuttings in the trash, or I'll save some for the missus, and then the rest will go in the trash. Because I'm going to give it a big haircut. I'm going to have a lot of cuttings. Hitting on the Hawaiian puff tonight. Oh, sorry, Janice. I saw your name and I was going to say hi, but I was mid-sentence and I didn't want to interrupt myself. So, hey, Janice. Oh, let's see. Rummy nose tetra. I got some new fish, Janice. I'll explain in a minute. In a 120, I don't think rummy nose tetras get that big. You could have a big ass school of them in there, 20 of them, 15, 18 of them. Basically put as many as you want. And then when the discus come later, I'm sure they'll start out small. And it takes discus, a few years to start getting up towards full size. So by then, your rummy nose will already be, full grown and getting older. And, by the time your discus are really starting to get up to size, you'll already be thinking about what you're going to be replacing those rummy nose with. So I'd go for it. I'd get some big ass school of them. But that's just me. Rosie, how are you? I had a friend of mine call me the other day, and he was having a fish emergency. A friend of his woke up to his tank being cracked, and I'm glad you're here for this, Janice. When he had gone to bed the night before, he hadn't noticed any crack or anything in the tank. And I don't, like the way he talked about it, I'm not exactly sure about the timeline or whether the crack ran really fast or he saw a little crack and didn't think it was an issue. But like basically like all at once the crack ran all the way down the length of his tank, and it basically did one of these numbers, went down and all the way over into the corner, and he was just pouring water all over his floor when he woke up. And so he got all the fish out, and the Petco took all of them except for a very, very old decrepit turquoise rainbow fish, and he also had an angelfish that they didn't have any room for. And so I took the rainbow fish just because that wasn't an issue, but I didn't really want the angelfish. It's nothing really super special about it. It's a pretty fish, but as I always say, they don't make any other kind of angelfish. I generally reserve my angelfish for fucking wowzers, like it's got to be something special for me to take up the room in my tank for an angelfish. Otherwise, you can just close your eyes and pick one at random, and you're going to get a pretty angelfish. So it's one of those. It's just a wild type. It's got the brown stripes down it and everything. It's a good looking fish, but it's just a basic angelfish. But the guy had no home for it, and I could tell he was distressed about it. And I just so out of empathy for him, and I don't want to see, like, he had to do something with the fish, and he was just out of he didn't know what he was going to do with it. And so I agreed that I would take it, and so I threw it in the 55 with the discus. The discus is actually starting to get worse. It had a little growth by its pectoral fin. Looked like a little tumor or something starting to grow, and now it has another one of those on its upper lip. So it definitely has like another tumor starting to grow on its upper lip. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I don't think it's anything to do with the tank or the tank conditions. I've had a lot of fish over the years that develop tumors, and I mean, I've had cats and dogs that develop tumors, as they aged and whatnot. You got to remember those discus I've had now for like 5 years or something, at least 4. I'll have to look and see how long. If anybody's bored and they want to scroll through my discus tank playlist, the playlist is not called discus tank. It's called my 125, or it's called the 125 gallon tank or something. You scroll back far enough, and I'm sure you'll see a video about like I got new discus today or something. So I don't know how many. I know it was in October. I do remember that for some reason, but I don't remember how many years ago it was. So again, it's not like that. Discus is a spring chicken. It's probably about midlife at this point. I think discus probably live 8 to 10 years. I'm guessing it's something similar to angelfish. Computer, what is the lifespan of a discus fish?
The discus, the fish's lifespan is typically between 8 years and 15 years.
Oh, 8 and 15. Wow, I was close. I got the 8 part right. It's pretty broad band. I was kind of giving it a little more of a narrow window than 8 to 15. But there you go. So even if they're 4, we're already looking at sort of a middle-age-ish fish. 4 years ago, discus disaster averted. Thanks, Bob. And hey, Bob. Greg, how are you? Stellars, how are you? Well, if you don't know my discus journey, I was too afraid to get discus too. For one, the price tag on them is ridiculous, and that's a fucking high risk reward ratio there when you're dropping $100 and $300 per fish or whatever, and you've never kept this kind of fish before. And their reputation is that, if you look at them too hard on the wrong Wednesday, and don't change the water 9 times, they're going to die. I can understand. But now that I've kept discus for a long time, or at least for 4 years, I've been keeping discus. I'm absolutely of the belief that the discus keeping community wants you to believe that, because they want to keep it some kind of exclusive community that everybody goes like, ooh, and pretends like discus keepers aren't just fucking fish keepers. They're some kind of special higher level something or other dumb bullshit. But no, if you can keep angelfish, you can keep discus. They're not difficult to keep. But you do have to have some skills. I'm not saying they're a beginner fish, but they're not like everybody says. You don't have to do crazy mad water changes. You don't have to have all these fucking tank specifics and all that. You see what my discus live in and the tank conditions. If you're a regular viewer, you know how infrequently the tanks get water changes. I don't feed them any special food. None of my discus have ever eaten beef heart. They're not what everybody makes them out to be. They're gorgeous fish. They're overpriced. But they're not difficult to keep. They're about as difficult as an angelfish. They might be a little fussy if you have them in a school, or you got to, be careful with tank mates. Again, they're not beginner fish. But as far as the water chemistry and care maintenance and temperature and all that stuff, none of my discus are in water that's above 80 degrees, unless the ambient room temperature goes above 80 degrees, which has been happening recently. But other than that, they're not difficult to keep. So if you can find a way to get them inexpensively, I would say, and you got the room for them, I would absolutely say to get them, if of course you've got the skill. I don't know how long you've been keeping fish. So I was never going to get them. And then one of my viewers, Iceman, he pops in and out from time to time still. He offered to buy me some discus. And at first I was like, no. And he's like, yeah, seriously, I want to, I want you to experience these discus. And so I went back and forth with him for, I don't know, we had 6 or 7 different, text interactions. And I made it 100% clear to him that if you get me these discus, I'm not going to do anything special for these discus. I'm going to put them in my tank and I'm going to treat them like I treat all my other fish. They're going to get water changes once every few months. They're not going to get any special food. I'm not running the temperature way high. And he's like, yep, that's fine, dude. That's why I'm getting them for you. I want to show you that will be fine. You will not have a problem, keeping your discus like that. I was like, all right, just so you know, it's your money, but if they die in 6 weeks, he's like, that's cool, dude. I understand. And so he sent me 5 beautiful discus. And after a few weeks, I bought 5 more. Well, I bought 3 more, and then he even threw 2 more in with me. That was the discus disaster that was almost averted. I had ordered 3, and he ordered them because he knew somebody and he got a little bit of a discount. And so I ordered them kind of through him. I told him what I wanted, and I said, get me 3 of these. And he got me 5. And as a surprise, he didn't tell me. And so when I was unboxing the fish, I pulled out 3 of them, and I left the box sitting there after I shot the unboxing video. And it wasn't until hours later I came in to pick up the box to throw it in the garbage. And I was going to throw it in the garbage. And it's like something that felt a little too heavy to throw, just like, what is this, something still in here? And I rooted around, and sure enough, there was 2 more bags of water in there with fish in them. So again, he had sent me 5 rather than 3. So I paid for 3 of the original discus, the original 10, and he paid for 7 of the original 10. And of that original 10, I still have 8 left, although one of them now has a tumor, 2 tumors on it. So, still not a bad run for my first cat out of the bag. I'd never kept discus before. And my first batch, I'm still running at 80% survival after 4 years. And the only other reason the one discus died was because the other discus bullied it and beat it to death, and I didn't recognize what was going on in time to separate it. Had I separated it, that one would in all likelihood still be alive as well. Yeah, wild discus might be hard to keep, but most people don't get wild discus. Well, that's where I'm lucky. And I agree with you on your philosophy there, scholars. I have very soft water. And so I've never bothered with hard water fish because I'm not going to do a bunch of shit to my water to make it okay. My brackish fish were the only exception that I made where I did, modify my water for the fish. Otherwise, if you can't live in my water, then you're not, you're going to live, same goes for plants. If the plants don't make it in my water under my conditions or whatever, I don't keep those plants. I plant stuff. If it thrives, great. If it dies off, I try to remember what that was and I don't buy it anymore. Speaking of plants, the Walmart has done away with its clearance stuff. It's throwing everything out. I can't believe how fast summer's already going by. I still have not even put the stickers on my kayak or been out once. And we're already like the back to school shit starting to pop up. I'm freaking out about how fast time is going. The crepe myrtles are blooming. I swear to Christ, any day now I'm going to start hearing the cicadas and I'm going to shudder. It's going to be like back to school days. Yeah, I was going to get to that, scholars, but I don't want to give out advice I'm not positive of. You say you have really hard water. I don't know what that means necessarily. A lot of people have different definitions of what really hard water is. Some city water can be really hard, but usually it's not. But well water can be ridiculously hard. Well water can go clank when it hits your fucking sink. So again, I don't know what you've got or what you're considering really hard water, but anything with the pH, probably I'd say under 8, even if you're up at like 7.8, something like that, I don't think you'd have any issue with the discus as long as your hardness was probably, I'm going to say 12 degrees or under, you probably wouldn't have any problem with the discus. Anything above 12 and you're starting to get into hard water, 15 is considered very hard. Anything above that's, generally considered liquid rock. But 6 to 9, that's like medium hardness. 10 to 12, you're starting to get up there, 13, 15. Now you got some pretty damn hard water. And again, that's going by degrees of hardness. And if you're in the water industry, if you're a water softener guy or whatever, you'll probably go by grains of hardness. And that gets really, I guess it's not that confusing. You just have to do some math. It's like 17.1 grains per degree or something like that. So if you wanted to find out how many grains of hardness you had, you just take whatever degree your water tester tells you and then multiply it by whatever the number is. Again, we'll just say, and don't take me for this as exact, but it's something like 17.1 or 17.6. It's some odd number that you can't just do off the top of your head unless you're one of those weird math people, and I am not. I struggle using a goddamn calculator. Well, scholars, you can't always go by that TDS. I swear I'm going to go to my grave talking about the TDS and the TDS meter. My water that is super duper soft and has 0 degree hardness and comes out of the water slightly acidic has about 225 parts per million. So it's what those parts are that are important. You have 300 parts per million, but 300 parts of what? Is there a lot of sodium? Is there a lot of fluoride in your water? Is there a lot of calcium, potassium, magnesium? There's a lot of different stuff. Anything that is electrically conductive, anything that would be considered a mineral salt, nitrate will not affect your TDS. That's something you don't have to worry about. Again, I've done this demonstration with sugar. You can mix sugar into your water until it turns into fucking syrup, and it will not affect the TDS. Your TDS meter will not change. But if you put a sprinkly tiny little pinch of salt in a glass of water, the TDS will go up by 500 parts per million, just from that tiny little bit of sodium chloride. So what's in your water is the important thing. It's not how many parts there are. The the parts per million, or the TDS number you get, is only it's a meaningless number unless you already have an idea of or the ability to test for what those parts actually are. It's a useful number in the sense that it's something you can easily measure, and it gives you some sort of basis to go by. You can see changes in your tank, and again, if you understand what it's really telling you, you don't want your TDS to be too low. What your TDS really is if you've ever heard of an electrical conductivity meter, that's all a TDS meter is. In fact, my TDS meter has a toggle on it. I can switch between EC or TDS, because your TDS is really the device itself. If you're using a TDS meter, that is an electrical conductivity meter. And if you want to read it as TDS, it just does the conversion for you and shows you a number in parts per million. But what it's reading is the electrical conductivity of the water. So if that gets too low, that means there's not enough electrolytes in the water. So you either have to add Brondo, or you have to make sure you've got, some source of calcium carbonate, and you need some sodium in there. You need some potassium in there. You need mineralization in your water, because your fish need those electrolytes. Remember, all the stuff we need, fish need it too, but they function differently. We keep our aquarium on the inside. That's why we have our skin to seal the water in. Fish live in their water. So the way stuff moves in and out through their gills is just very different than us, but they still need all the same things. And so you need mineralization in the water. It just depends, again, on what it is and how much of what, and so on and so forth. But most captive bred discus at this point have been bred in captivity for so long that 300 parts per million, even if that was all calcium and magnesium, that really does not sound like a lot to me. When I think of like really hard water, I think of 900, maybe 1,000 parts per million of calcium, not of just random shit, but just 900 parts per million of calcium in the water. That's hard water. If you've got 300 parts per million, I wouldn't sweat that at all. All right, let's move it on to the next tank. And this is the tank that has the brand new angelfish in it that you may or may not be able to see right there. If I can get my tripod past all this shit that I got piled up. See, that's the new angelfish. Very pretty fish, and it really does have a lot of color in it. It's got a lot of blue in its dorsal fin. So I'm not, again, I'm not complaining about it. It's just if I had gone to the store and decided I wanted to put an angelfish in this tank, that probably would not have been the one I got. Oh, let's throw some granules in this tank tonight. And I can actually see a couple of shrimp down here on the bottom. So I know we still got shrimp in this tank. The discus is like buried itself in the corner underneath the power head. I have no idea why it's freaking out like that. It doesn't usually get that skittish when I walk around the tank. Maybe it knows it's got tumors and shit growing on it, and it knows something's wrong, so it's feeling more defensive and reclusive. I suppose that's possible. Yeah, angelfish always look like they're Lord of the Realm. Well, topping off is another one of those things. Well, again, just pretty much there's very few things in life that are just cut and dry. There are some, but water changes is going to depend on how your tank is set up, and more importantly, what kind of water you have. If you do have really hard water, or even just a lot of dissolved solids in it, regardless of what they are, because remember, water hardness is only a measurement of the calcium and the magnesium, and technically also iron, but we have very little iron in the water for the most part. That's not really something we talk about in the fish keeping hobby very much. It's the calcium and the magnesium is what the hardness is. Anything else in the water, you got potassium in there, you got sodium in there, got nothing to do with the hardness. It's calcium and it's magnesium. That's the only thing that water hardness is counted as. And so you still have to have all other stuff in there too. You have to have the sodium and the magnesium and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember where I was going with this. Something about the mineralization. God damn it. I went in the other room to tap out my stuff in an ashtray, and I lost myself somewhere in the middle of my own sentence. I somehow got to the end of the sentence, but I don't remember what the beginning of it was. I'd be interested to see if there's some correlation between people with ADHD and being marijuana smokers, and like the self-medicating sort of aspect of it, like whether I've realized I've been doing that or not. I'm pretty sure I've been using the weed to self-medicate over the years, but if there's a correlation between marijuana smokers and ADHD, that would make sense, because marijuana smokers have a reputation for, like, what were we talking about? Or like, that's got nothing to do with weed. I've smoked a lot of fucking weed in my life. I've smoked enough weed to say a lot of people have smoked a lot of weed in their lives, but it's not a marijuana thing. Like, I have ADHD. Like that always happens to me, whether I'm high or I'm not. I've always said that about, like, oh, where they say marijuana makes you stupid. Well, no, it's just that there's a lot of fucking stupid people in the world, and many of them smoke marijuana. There's no correlation between the two. It ain't the marijuana that made them stupid. They started that way, and then they just happened to also smoke marijuana. Marijuana doesn't make you stupid, and it also doesn't make you forget what you were talking about before you get to the end of the sentence. That's my ADHD doing that shit. And so that would make sense if people with ADHD, like, typically, like, smoking weed is one of them self-medication kind of things, because I could see where that comes from. Then dude smokes weed and he's always forgetting what he's talking about. Yeah, but it's not the weed, it's the ADHD that's doing it. So that might be an interesting study for somebody to try. Water hardness and causes. Yeah, I know I was talking about water hardness. I appreciate the help. And is that you, Steve, or is this a different Steve? Oh, that's some hard fucking water, Mike. It's a different Steve. That's what I thought. Hey, Steve, welcome aboard. And again, thank you for the thank you for the brain reminder, but I still do not know what the hell I was going to say about all that water hardness. If anybody has any more questions about TDS and water hardness and all that kind of stuff, feel free to ask. I can ramble on about that shit without even thinking about it. Oh, hello from England. Yeah, well, I've done this YouTube stuff long enough now that, hey, Harry, I'll get to your comment in a second. I'm getting ready to move the camera. I'll have people all the time that, I'll see a new name and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is, Joe from whatever. This is my other account, or I'm using my wife's phone, or so I don't know. I see Steve in there and, like, I only know one Steve, and maybe he's got a separate account or something. Who knows? I didn't think it was the same one. That's why I asked. But again, welcome aboard, new Steve. And I'm not going to call you new Steve. Don't worry. All right, let's get my camera set up here. And I swear this discus in here is turning out to be just the most gorgeous discus I've got. It really is. I got I had an experience the other day, and I really want to talk shit about it because it really got on my nerves. But I also know this is a public live stream, and there's not a 0% chance that people I wouldn't want hearing me talking shit might hear me talking shit. So I'm not going to do it. But this discus is absolutely stunning, and it still amazes me about the color change in these two fish. Again, if you're new, I got 3 discus from a viewer, a different set of discus from a different viewer, and they were all really orange, and they were in a 40-gallon tank. They started to outgrow it, and so I put 2 of them in my discus tank with my blue discus. If you aren't familiar with my discus tank, all the discus in there are blue. And so I put 2 of the orange ones in with the blue. One of them, unfortunately, did not survive. I think it got bullied. But the one did survive. And then the third out of the 3 orange ones I put in this tank. And you can see it's got a lot of blue in its dorsal fins, and there's definitely some underlying blue all throughout that fish. Depends on how it moves. But it is vibrant orange, and some of that orange on its fins and around its nostril hump. It's almost red. It's getting so orange in there. When we get to the discus tank, it's basically twin is the other way around. It's basically a blue fish with orange underlying. It's much more pronounced than the blue is on this one. You can definitely tell there's a lot of orange base there, but that's what it looks like. It looks like an orange base with like blue coloration all over it. It's amazing how blue the other one turns simply by putting it in with the blue discus. Oh, that's what I was talking about, was the topping off. Harriman, I actually don't do well with the mollies. Swordtails, platies, guppies, they all do well, but mollies do not do well in my water, and I think it's because my water is just too soft for them. Yeah, discus basically are cleaner fish. They're bottom feeders. I know a lot of people don't like to think about discus as bottom feeders, but discus are technically, well, they'll feed anywhere. They'll feed off the surface. They'll eat stuff off the surface of plants. They'll eat stuff out of the water column. But by their body shape, they're designed to point straight down and like root through the leaf litter and stuff on the bottom and find stuff to eat down there. So discus really are bottom feeders. Yeah, this discus, the orange one you're looking at now, is really colored up and gotten bright. Let's see. Mr. Natural, how are you? The parents of these discus, oh God, I had it written down at one point. They're not parrot's blood, they're a hybrid. He had 2 in his tank that bred, and these were the babies. And I can't remember what they were now, but it was, I don't know. It was just 2 different ones. Same with this angelfish. That he gave me this angelfish too, and that angelfish is a lace zebra. I wish I wrote that down and then I did away with it. Well, since I just talked about it while it's still in your mind, let me go show you that other fish real quick. We're not going to feed that tank now, but that's the one that started out completely orange and is now turned much more blue. Of course, the stupid big blue ones are in the way, but come on, guys, break it up a little. I wonder if I move the camera over here. There we go. Swim out of there a little bit. You see how completely different that one looks than the other one? You'll see it better. There you go. We'll see it better once we're over here actually feeding it. And let's see, there's the turquoise rainbow fish back there, that old fish swimming around. So that probably older than my old rainbow fish, because that rainbow fish is probably 7 or 8 years old now, at least, maybe even older. I lose track of time. I looked the other day, that tank down there, the one we were looking at a little while ago, the 125, I thought that tank was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the most. It'll be 10 years old. No. When did I set that up? I set the pond up in 2024. No, 2022. So that's 4 years old. Yeah, my other 125 with the silver dollars is 10 years old this October, which makes my one we were just looking at, the discus tank, makes that 11 years old. this October, because I got the first one with the discus in it for Black Friday, and I was so happy with it that the following year I went out for the next Black Friday and got the other 125 that's got the silver dollars in it. And so if that's 10 years old, then my discus tank is 11 years old. The discus haven't been in it that whole time, but that tank has been there for 11 years now. So getting back to what I was saying with the topping off of your water, if you have water that has a high amount of dissolved solids in it, regardless of what they are, that's where I got distracted. Water hardness only counts for the calcium and the magnesium, but there can be a lot of other stuff in your water that shows up on a TDS meter that doesn't necessarily count for hardness, but it's still stuff that's in your water. And that's the important part, because as the water dissolve or evaporates out of your aquarium, and that's why we need to top it off from time to time. The water evaporates away, the water level goes down, we need to add more water. What you're doing is you're distilling it down. If you've got dissolved solids in that water, they stay there. The water level goes down, but the amount of dissolved solids in the water stays there. And as the water level gets lower and lower, the concentration of those dissolved solids gets higher and higher. So when you add fresh water, you might be diluting the dissolved solids that are in there, but you're also still adding more in your water. And so when the water evaporates away again, all the ones you've now added in your last top off are in there as well. And then you top it off again and you add more dissolved solids in it. And then as that water evaporates, and you're just condensing it and distilling it down and adding more and more and more dissolved solids into the tank. So that is something to keep in mind. Not saying don't just do top offs. I do tons of top offs on my tanks. However, I know that I don't have a lot of stuff in my water, and I can get away with doing quite a few top offs without really disturbing the TDS levels in the tank. And I also generally do water changes on the tank every, I don't know, I don't go that many top offs before I'll do a water change. Not necessarily for that reason, but for whatever reason, the water change still gets done, and I kind of refresh the tank and start over. So just be mindful that when you're doing top offs, whatever water you're using, you're adding, whatever you're adding in with that water stays there. So if you really wanted to be anal about it and you did top offs, you could use distilled water, or purified water, RO water, or something like that for your top off. That way you'd be adding water, but not increasing the amount of dissolved solids you're putting in there. You'd only be adding water to it, not water with stuff in it. And it's that stuff you're adding that builds up over time. Yeah, there you go, Mr. Natural. Exactly. Topping off with the RO water is exactly what I was talking about. Steve. Look, there's the other Steve. Yeah, I got it, Janice. Thanks. I couldn't tell you the answer to that specifically, Mike. I would say not very much. And most of what the minerals that a guppy is going to use to build its body, it needs minerals to build its bones and so on and so forth. That's going to come from its diet more so than the water. The mineralization has more to do with electrolytes for, we're not going to look at this tank just yet. We'll come back and look at the polypterus at the end. And we are going to do a couple little experiments in the pond. So stick around for that. I'm going to mess around with a nitrate reactor. And we will talk about the nitrate reactor, how I'm going to build it, why I'm going to build it, what I think it's going to accomplish, etc. And I need to tinker with some ideas before I buy parts tomorrow. And so tonight we're going to tinker with a few ideas. So stick around if you want to see some practical experimentation going on in the pond here in a little while. Damn it, I did it again. Lost my train of thought. Throwing the granules in here. Oh, right. A guppy The reason they need the mineralization in the water is partially for the electrolytes. And what electrolytes do in our body is they allow for our nervous system to work. You always hear, people will say, well, our nervous system is like electrochemical. The way it works in a nutshell is, you know how the nerves will send a signal from one nerve to the next, and like the neurotransmitters, the chemicals like leap through that synapse, that gap, and stimulate the next nerve, which just sends it on down the line. Before the chemicals go, an ion goes, and the ion primes the next nerve to receive the chemical that's going to go. That's your electrochemical nervous system. And those are your electrolytes. Those are the sodium ions and the potassium ions, and you need calcium channels. All this stuff goes on that deals with our nervous system and how our musculature works and functions and all that. And that's what electrolytes are for. And fish need those same electrolytes for the same reasons. And they probably do get some in their food, but the fish can get their electrolytes through, through osmoregulation, through bringing water in and out through their gills as they need it. So they are capable of making some adjustments, but there are, windows. You put a saltwater fish in really hard water. The reason it dies is because it can't osmoregulate enough to account for the disparity in what it wants to be in versus what it is in. But that's a different argument. If anybody wants me to explain why hard water fish can't go in salt water and vice versa, I can explain that as well. Because at this point, I'm beginning to think there's nothing I don't know about fish keeping. I have gotten to the end of the line. Actually, I'm just kidding. There's tons I still don't know. Let's see. What was Janice's question? You don't have an RO water. What water can you buy distilled? You can use distilled if you're using it for top-offs. I kept a saltwater tank once upon a time, Harriman. It was a disaster, and I learned a lot from that experience. The main thing I learned was that me and my personality and saltwater tanks are not compatible, and I lost interest in it really quickly. It's not for me. I'm not really interested. I don't think I'll ever do another saltwater tank. I can't say I never will. Who knows what the future holds? But I really don't see myself ever bothering with a saltwater tank again. It really just surprisingly didn't hold my interest. And the reason it didn't hold my interest, it was, put it this way, the perfect hobby is challenging enough so that you don't get bored, but not so challenging that you get frustrated. And for me, the way a saltwater tank needs to be run and managed is just so discordant with my personality and the way I do things, my ADHD and everything, that it wasn't enjoyable. It was frustrating, and I wasn't having success at it. And like that's, I'm not saying if I really I understand how to do it. If I really wanted to do it and made myself, I probably could. I just don't think I would enjoy it. It's not my kind of, devil may care sort of, everything in my life has to be like, oh, if I forget about it for a few days, it'll be fine, kind of setup. Everything's got to be super chill, easy going. And saltwater tanks are just none of those things. They're very fiddly. Everything's got to be exacting. Tiny little changes in anything can fucking throw havoc into the tank. You got to be, I go on and on about how you don't have to worry about nitrate. Well, if I was talking about saltwater, that would be a very different story. Nitrate is crucial in a saltwater tank. Tiny little amounts of it can wreck your aquarium. Like, you have to keep the nitrate like below 5 parts per million. You got to worry about the potassium levels, the phosphate levels. It's not for me. That's not my kind of fish keeping. 44 years. Holy crap. That's how long I feel like I've been married. Yeah, I already made the Brondo joke, Steve, but I don't think anybody caught it. My jokes are so smooth and seamless that nobody even gets them. Well, Janice, my advice would be that if you're not really having any problems, and I know you do have weird issues with your water, I don't know if that causes you problems or not. Um, I wouldn't invest a bunch of money into an RO system or anything. If like what you've been doing is fine and it's your fish are okay, I wouldn't worry too much about it if that's the case. But you do have options. If you're only, I don't know how big your tank is or how much water you're topping off. If you go to the Walmart or someplace like that, you can get gallon jugs of distilled water for like 88 cents or 90 cents. Um, Drinking water is also an option. Drinking water is basically RO water that has been remineralized for taste. I say this all the time. Pure water is not enjoyable to drink. It's really rough on the tongue. You need those electrolytes in there. Like sodium is a magic fucking chemical or molecule. Sodium does amazing things on our tongue, into our body, into our taste buds and whatnot. Not to mention all the stuff it does in our body to keep us alive. But pure water is just not something you're going to want to drink. So drinking water is, RODI water. They just take regular old tap water and they run it through an RODI system and they get it down to effectively pure water. And then they add just enough potassium and sodium and stuff to make it smooth on the tongue and just make it a more enjoyable drink. However, it's a very minimal amount. And so if you don't want to risk putting pure water into the environment, and again, if you're using it for top offs, that's fine. Don't ever fill a tank with distilled water. Like fish cannot live in pure water. And that's why I never recommend distilled water. I just don't want people having accidents. If you're using it for top offs, distilled water is fine. I always recommend the drinking water simply because that's been remineralized a little bit. And so it is very, very low TDS water that if you're doing top offs with it, you wouldn't be adding much to it. But there is some mineralization in it. And that way, if anybody does use it to like, hey, I'm going to like fill this little quart container and keep a couple guppies in it or something. If you use distilled water, those guppies are going to die. Most algae can't grow in distilled water. You need to have electrolytes in water for just about anything to grow. So keep that in mind. You don't want pure water for your fish. In fact, the friend of mine, the guy my neighbor, his brother-in-law worked in a lab down at Johns Hopkins, and they were doing some study where they were trying to do, they were using sunfish. And they were buying the sunfish from a breeder. It's a lab, so they're not going out and catch them in the wild, too many variables or whatever. So these were lab grown, for experimental purposes. And they kept getting, sunfish, like they just kept dying and they couldn't keep them alive. And I asked them how they were doing it and how they were setting it up and everything and why. And I was like very, very early in my fish keeping days. And he told me what they were doing because, again, this is a lab scenario there. You want to use purified everything. They were using distilled water and, they're going to set up a pure tank to put the fish in. And so there was no contamination. I was like, well, there's your problem. Like fish cannot live in distilled water. I said, just use the fucking tap water or buy drinking water if you want a controlled, and I did hear later, 6 months from him, he was like, dude, we stopped using the distilled water and the fish do fine now. I was like, yeah, no shit. So, yeah, that's what they were doing, trying to keep fish in distilled water. You just can't do it. It's Brondo, Janice. I don't use Gatorade. That's the wrong brand. And to the point of the RO system, I bought a fairly expensive RO system that runs up into my kitchen and has like a valve on my sink and all that. It doesn't work anymore, but I never used it, but it is there. You can buy little RO systems that you can screw on to your kitchen sink. And if you don't need a lot of RO water, like if you're just using it to make your coffee and stuff like that, you can get yourself a gallon or two of that, set it to the side. When you're ready for your top offs, you've got your own RO water right there. And you might pay 60 or 70 bucks for, the system. But eventually, if you do it a lot, it'll pay for itself if you're paying $1 a piece for jugs at the Walmart. You could probably even get away with one of those filters that you just, it's like a drinking water filter. My parents always used to use one of these. You just plug it into the sink, and I don't know what else it took out of the water, but they, I never knew how much chlorine was in city water. Again, it's not enough to harm you. It's good that it's there. It's you know, it's a safety issue. It's a public health thing, and so it's good that it's there. But as far as drinking it, like I just grew up with city water in Baltimore, and I never realized it. And I was telling my parents like, oh, it's the, you know, whatever, isn't it? You know. And so my dad was like, come here. And he poured one glass of water like directly out of the tap. And then he pulled the little stopper thing out. And then the water started coming out of his little filter. And he filled a glass up of that. And he's like, smell this and let me smell the filtered water. And I was like, yeah, it just doesn't smell like anything. And he's like, smell this one. And it smelled like an indoor swimming pool. You know, ever walk into like an indoor swimming pool that just over like it burns your eyes. It's like it seemed that strong when comparing it to having it filtered out. So I know those things at least take the chlorine and chloramines and stuff out. Those things are really cheap, and my parents would use them for years and years and years. Before ever replacing them, as long as they weren't smelling any chlorine or anything in the water, they never worried about it. I think chlorine was the only thing they were really worried about getting out of the water. But you could even use one of those, I think, and it would give you much cleaner water or much purer water for doing top offs. Shit, I wish I was 44 again, too. I'm not 10 years off. I will be 55 this year, though, but I was born at the end of the year, so it always fucks me up when I do the math of how old I actually am. Because if you just look at the number, 71 to, you know, to 26, I'm 55, but I'm not, because I'm not actually 55 until December. And I turn 55 and then bang, it's 27. And again, the numbers are wrong. Zany. Yeah, I think I paid about $300 to have my water people install my system. I have a four. I don't have an RODI. I just have the RO system. It goes through four filters, and then I have a big 60-gallon tank that I let fill up. Oh, let's see. It is good to see you, Zany. I've been wondering about you. I almost sent you a meme today, but I decided I would wait. Well, Janice, guppies are pretty hard water fish, so I think they would probably be least affected by an accumulation of dissolved solids in the water. I think the fish that you'd be more concerned about will be the softer water fish. And again, you know, if anybody wants me to talk about the reason soft water fish and hard water fish need those kinds of waters, I can, but I'm not just going to start rambling about it. You'll have to ask me, and then I'll be glad to tell you. We're going to turn the forward light on. And then we're going to feed the sinking pellets so he goes right down in the front. And then after this, we will start tinkering with the pond a little bit. I'm going to trim up one of the plants. And I also want to do a little experimentation on, I'm going to be building a nitrate reactor here in the near future. I think tomorrow I'm going to run over to the Lowe's and pick up some parts that I need. And I'm not exactly sure the size of the PVC tubing I'm going to need for the well, I'll explain it. But I'm going to do a little bit of experimenting tonight. And basically, I'm thinking about lifting water and the diameter of the tube that I'm going to be lifting the water in. I'm going to be using an air stone rather than an actual pump. And an air stone will only lift water based on the diameter of the pipe, the volume of the water, and the height that you are actually trying to lift it up out of the water. So if you've got too big of a diameter of pipe, the water just kind of sits there and the bubbles go through it and it doesn't carry any water with it. And if you've got too narrow of a tube, you just get a lot of air bubbles and there's not enough room for water to go up with it. And of course, if you got the pipe too far up out of the water, as the bubbles rise and the water, eventually the water falls back down and it's just air coming out the top. So you got to get that, low enough where the water is still bubbling out the top of it. So you can adjust the volume of air you've got moving through it. You can adjust the diameter of the pipe. You can adjust how high up and down out of the water you make it. And so I'm going to tinker with a few of those. I have 3 different size tubes. I only have 1 piece of PVC, which I think is going to be too small. I thought I had a few other sizes of PVC. Well, technically I do, but they're all like 2 inches and whatnot. That's again, bubbles would just come up through the middle. It wouldn't move any water at all. I need something maybe up to 1 inch in diameter, and I do have something that'll work. Again, I never throw anything away that might be useful one day, and so some stupid piece of plastic I saved from years ago is going to come in handy tonight because it's the perfect size tube to experiment with whether or not water will flow up it or not. I think it's the blue water aquariums that are filled with Brondo. I guess Brondo was green, wasn't it? Yeah, I was going to suggest like the Brito water filters, those kind of things. Anything like that. If you're just doing top offs and you just want to, remove some stuff from the water, so you're adding as little as possible with your top offs. If you have one of those drinking water pitchers where you pour it in and it, filters, and an hour later you got a pitcher full of water, use that. That, again, might not take it down to RO levels, but it'll remove a lot of the stuff that's in the water, and it'll be that much less that you're adding in between top offs. You don't dechlorinate the water or anything before you put it in there because it doesn't take much chlorine at all to kill fish. Now, you can dechlorinate the water with water conditioners and dechlorinators, which aren't technically dechlorinators. They sort of dechlorinate the water, but for all intents and purposes, it's good enough. Or you can just let the water sit. If you sit it in an open 5-gallon bucket, and if you really want to crank it up, you can put an air stone in there. The chlorine will off gas at a rate of about 1 gallon per hour. So if you got a 5-gallon bucket, you let it sit there for 5 hours. Again, you put an air stone in, it'll be even less time. But stir it around occasionally, swirl the water, mix it around, and within 4 or 5 hours, the chlorine should be out of that water. So that's a way you can just naturally get rid of chlorine in your water. Chloramine, and you can check your municipal water, your city's water site, and it'll tell you whether you've got chlorine or chloramine, or at least it should. And the chloramine is a little more challenging to get rid of, which is why they use it for certain things at certain times of year. But I do believe you can still get rid of even the chloramine just by giving it enough time to evaporate out of the water. All right, I'm trying to get my camera connected here, and then we can zoom in on the fishy fish and give you guys a little bit more of a close-up look to enjoy it. I am going to pack up another bong hit, and then in a bit we will get to working on the pond. Again, we're going to tinker with a little bit of air stones and moving a little bit of water through some pipes. I have a plant I need to trim up, and I did not feed my shrimp tanks, and so I do need to go throw some food at the shrimp. But first, let's do this bong hit since it's in my hand. What did I do? Oh, I know what I did. When I reached for my weed, I must have dragged my finger across my phone without noticing, and I repositioned where the camera's pointing. I rode my bicycle down to my local vape shop again today. They suck. they didn't have any pods at all for the Lux, for my main pod. All they had was pods for the mini, which is what I really needed. So I did get those, but they only had 0.06 and 0.08. So I got the 0.06, which I think is what I use in that pod or in that device anyway. But we're going to Westminster tomorrow, me and the missus. And so I'm going to swing by the vape shop over there and pick myself up some of those 0.08 pods. I really do like the 0.08 better than the 0.04s. Name. Where's that supposed to be? Nom. Nom. I don't think she's getting thinner. I just think she's getting longer. I think she just doesn't, her proportions aren't so chunky now that she's starting to stretch out. I was looking at her the other day, and I really do think she's about twice as long as she was when I got her. I'd have to go back and look at some early videos, but I swear she was like the diameter of my, about the size of my pinky when we got her, and she's got to be pushing 7 inches by now. She's a good sized little fish now. Get back here. Where'd you go? Let's see. GW is bigger. I'm not sure who GW is. I'm guessing she's about 7 inches. Somewhere in that neighborhood. I think I said she was a little over 6 inches last time, so I'm just kind of guesstimating now, saying 7. Oh, the Great Wizard, I got you. Well, she also used to live in a tank that was swarming with shrimp, and she hasn't had a tank full of shrimp in a while, so all she gets is the food I give her every day. I try to be fairly generous. I don't need her to be overweight. I just want her to be healthy. And as far as I'm concerned, she looks great. I don't think she looks like she's underfed at all. But she's definitely not plump like she used to be. And I do think she's stretching out. Here, I'll get a tape measure. And if she lays down near the glass and stretches out, we'll see if we can get a guesstimation of how big she is. Where the hell is my tape measure? What? That's one of those things that always lives in its spot. And I always know where it is when I need it, and it's not there. So now I don't know where the fuck my tape measure is. What did I do with it? All right, I'm going to start stressing out over my tape measure. I have other tape measures. It's just that that's one that I always know where it is, and I use for little stupid shit. So, all right, I'll try not to get too stressed over my missing tape measure because it's really not that important, but my brain keeps telling me it is. Let's grab this tape measure. It's a big-ass tape measure. All right, let's see. Oh, sorry, fishy. I'm actually going to say a little over 7 inches at this point. Again, just a guesstimation. She'd have to lay perfectly flat right up against the glass for me to get a real measurement on her. So let's see if she stretches out again. I don't know if she can see this tape measure or not. She's got really, really poor vision. There she goes. I'm going to say just under 7 inches. I don't think she's quite over 7 yet, but she's pretty damn close to 7. And for maximum size, I've heard everything from 7 to 12 inches. So I have no idea how big she's actually going to get. Oh yeah, she doesn't miss any food, believe me. I don't know honestly if those brown roots are really doing a whole lot at all. They could be there to simply trap detritus and stuff so that it, decays into the substrate and provides nutrients for the plant. Don't really. Oh man, I got a dead frond floating in here that has a bunch of hair algae growing attached to it. So let's pull that out right now. I got a bunch of damn duckweed growing in this tank again too. Damn it! I don't know how I got duckweed back in here, but I don't know why I had a big clump of hair algae floating in that one spot because I don't really have hair algae in this tank thanks to the shrimp. But that one floating thing had a huge wad of hair algae on it. It was weird. Now my fingers are wet and I can't get the screen to do what I want. Come on. Stop, 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 stop. Come on. Oh, Jesus Christ. Come on. Yeah, there's other fish I could put in there with her, but I'm probably not going to. Anything that is not a bottom dweller, so things like plecos and catfish and whatnot would be out of the question because there'd be territorial disputes. So no other bottom dwellers, and then basically it would have to be any non-aggressive fish that would be big enough that the polypterus couldn't eat that fish, and then the fish would also have to be small enough that it wouldn't try to eat the polypterus. Now, this counts a lot more when if you're putting a large fish in with a small polypterus or vice versa. This one's big enough now that I can't imagine what kind of fish I'd put in a 40-gallon tank that would be able to eat that fish. But there are plenty of fish I could put in there. I could put a school of tetras in there and have them swimming around, as long as they were larger tetras that the polypterus couldn't eat. Obviously, I couldn't do a school of neons, but I could put live bears in there with her. I could put an angelfish in there without really much issue. That's actually not a bad idea. I could put an angelfish in that tank, but I just feel like that's her tank. Like she's so cool and so unique. Maybe some shrimp and stuff like that. Maybe someday I'll put some small schooling fish in there that are, you know, innocuous, but in there, maybe like some black skirt tetras or something real basic like that. Yeah, you can do a lot of different African themed fish. You can do the African butterfly fish, the tenopoma, different various tetras, Congo tetras, as Zini was saying. Basically, anything that's not aggressive and won't fit in its mouth can go in there with it. So, really versatile fish, easy to keep, doesn't need a whole picky, diet or anything like that. It'll eat any goddamn thing. It's like a trash disposal when it comes to food. I feed it randomly whatever I'm feeding the other fish for the night. Sometimes it's the crisps, sometimes it's flakes, sometimes it's the granules. I've thrown algae wafers in there. She eats algae wafers. Definitely will eat any kind of live food. I put shrimp in there. She hunts the shrimp at night and eats the shrimp. You're not going to have a problem feeding one of these. Trust me. They're not picky. Yeah, I was going to get into the list of different cichlids, but I figure I'm just kind of being redundant at this point. Just anything that's non-aggressive that isn't a bottom dweller and she won't try to eat can go with her. You could put Bolivian rams in there, a jewel cichlid, something like that. Although jewel cichlids are kind of bottomy dwellers, so I don't know if a jewel cichlid would be the best idea. Oh, look at that. Gene Zini saying jewel cichlid right now. Aren't they kind of cave dwellers? I don't know if I'd want to put like a bottom cave dwelling type fish in with the polypterus. Again, that would be a territorial issue. If I was going to do that, then I'd be, I'd have a clown pleco or something in there already. I'm trying to avoid that because I don't want another bottom, cave type dwelling fish. But I also think that as small as that fish is, respectively for its environment, if I had something like a clown pleco in there, I don't think they'd be fighting over fucking cave space or anything. I think there's plenty of room for two small fish like that to get by just fine. Yeah, mine eats any damn thing. Like I said, algae wafers, doesn't matter. All right, let's get on with doing some of this experimenting before it gets too much later. I don't want to make it a super late night tonight. So, did I zoom you out yet, or are you still zoomed way in? Okay, I got you zoomed out. All right. We're not going to do anything fancy. I just want to get up against the edge here. I guess the first thing we can do is trim that plant up, save some of those cuttings. So this will be easy enough to do. Let's see. Let me do it over something that I can collect the cuttings into, and then I can put some of them in water. All right. You see how much it's hanging over the side of the planter. It's getting out of control. Here, let me turn your light on. So it's a gorgeous plant, but it definitely needs a serious haircut. So we're going to give it a bowl cut. All right. Nice, fresh summer cut. He'll thank me for it when the weather gets nice and hot in a couple days. And that's all I trimmed off of it was one entire box full of trimmings. All right, let me go find a couple of these to stick in a glass of water. Just so I can make some cuttings. I'll probably just throw a handful into a bucket here. Let's just do that. I can find them tomorrow. Jesus, I think I got enough to make a couple of cuttings here. I could go take a quarter of my yard and plug it like hair plugs, and in 6 weeks I'd have nothing but dragon's tongue all over a whole side of my yard. That was a lot of trimming. All right, that'll all be fine till the morning. I'll come down here tomorrow and make some actual cuttings and put them in some soil or something. All right, let's get on with trying to mess around with these tubes and air stones. So this is the only actual piece of PVC pipe I have, and it's very narrow. So that's probably going to be too narrow. I have a piece of polycarbonate, which is a little bit bigger. And then I have a piece of what was an old, actually, let's move this bong before I knock it over. This used to be a diffuser over an LED light to make it look like a fluorescent tube. But it actually is just a nice hollow plastic tube that is even a little bit bigger than the polycarbonate. So this is probably about the size that I think we're going to want to use. And the air pump we're going to be using is this little air pump I got from Walmart. I really like these. They're super quiet. They're even quieter than the Tetra Whispers. And this one is $10 for the little one. And I got a big one for $14. And that's the one that I've got running the air stone in the pond right now. It's actually got 2 outlets on it. And so I ran both lines into a T, and then I ran that into one line. So I basically have both outlets going into one air stone. And that's what's driving that whole, 8-inch long bar that I've got in there. So we're not going to mess with any of the check valves or anything. All I need is a piece of hose and an air stone, because we're just going to drop it inside the pipe and then hold it in the water and see how much water we get flowing out the top of it. So let me get a piece of airline cut. And I recently was talking to someone about me buying. Now I also got to find an air stone. Here's one. I recently bought a roll of silicone air line tubing, and I really like it. For one thing, it's black rather than that white plastic or that clear plastic that turns white. So it's much less noticeable in the tank itself, and it's really soft and flexible. So you can do a lot more with it rather than that sort of stiff vinyl plastic. So we're going to stick an air stone on it, and I bought a 50-foot roll of it, and I think it was Steve I was talking to, and they were commenting about not really needing 50 feet of airline. But I go through it. I use it for different stuff, and if you can spend $10 on a 50-foot roll of it, why not? So let me cut this off. Where did I leave my scissors this time? I was just using them. Where in the hell did I put those scissors? I was just using them to trim that plant up. Oh, come on. How did I lose my scissors? Because my scissors are another one of those things that have a certain spot that they live in, and I always put them there, and I don't see them. And I was just fucking using them. So where did I set them down? Well, I got another pair of scissors in here too. Oh, I set them down in here. I must have still had them in my hand when I carried in the box of cuttings. All right. We're all good. I still got to find my damn tape measure. That's going to bother me. So let us attach this. Oh, for fuck's sake, where did I put the air stone now? All right, I've now lost the air stone. Oh, God, I swear to God, my brain is broken. All right. Fortunately, I also buy air stones in packages of 10, so I'm not even going to look for that one. I'm just going to grab another one. Oh, God, I'm an idiot. I swear to God, I got a broken brain. I couldn't find the air stone anywhere. You know why I couldn't find the air stone? Because I already stuck it in the end of the damn hose, and I was looking everywhere for this thing. So now we have a spare. All right, I think we're just about ready, everybody. We got our little pump. We got our hose all nice and connected up. So all we got to do now is plug her in, and stick it down in those tubes and see what happens. And I just happen to have a handy dandy extension cord ready. All right, I'm just going to show you this. You see my microphone right here? Can you hear that at all? You probably hear the pond, but do you hear this? This is running. This is plugged in right now. It's just so quiet. I can't believe it. Again, it makes the Tetra whispers sound loud. All right, let's see what it does. I was afraid of this. So we know this isn't going to work because the air stone barely fits down inside of it, but let's just see what happens. Yeah, I'm not even getting any, the water's barely coming up through it because it has to work its way around the air stone. All right, we got to do something better with the camera. You guys couldn't even see what was going on there. Let's bring you over this way a little bit. So again, this one, the air stone barely fits inside of it. So when we put that one down in there, all we get is this. Should I zoom you guys in? Can you see this? See that little bit of water bubbling at the top? That is definitely not as much water flow as I'm going to want for what we're going to be building. So let's move up to the next size, which is this, probably close to 3/4 inches. And this is a little long, so we're going to have to do this one at an angle. Let's put the hose way down in there and see what happens. So it's moving water, but not a lot of it. And I've got it about an inch out of the water, and we don't even have any flow. I have to put it almost at the water's edge to get water to flow out of it. So I'm thinking either we're going to have to use a different air stone a different pump and get a much, much more vigorous air pump, or I'm probably going to have to just use an actual pump rather than the air stone method. So let's see how much air or water moves through this larger tube. Again, just not a lot. This is a little more effective, but not really. It only really starts coming out when I put it at an angle, and that's almost right at the water's surface. So, all right. Well, that was a successful experiment nonetheless. That's the whole point of an experiment, is to find out whether it works or not, and that did not. So we're either going to have to use a much more vigorous air stone, or, as I said, I'm thinking we're going to probably just wind up using a small pump. I'm going to have to rethink how I'm going to design this. So let us talk about what I'm going to do, how, and why, and what it will accomplish. And I can answer the what it will accomplish thing in one simple word: nothing. It's not going to accomplish anything. Well, I guess technically what it'll accomplish will be satisfying my curiosity, but it's not going to accomplish anything functionally for my aquarium. So, hang on, let me get ready before I go into a whole screed about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and why, because this is going to get complicated. If you're not somebody that's interested in water chemistry and the nitrogen cycle and how all this shit works, then this is probably your time to go do something else, because I'm probably going to go way down a rabbit hole talking about all that stuff, because we're going to have to start by explaining how the system works before I explain how I'm going to build mine, because if I just explain how I'm going to build it, it won't make any sense to you. So you need to understand what's happening when I build it. So we're going to do that. But first, I'm going to do a dab, and then we'll start talking about it. I don't really feel like I need to, but I should probably start by doing a really super quick recap of how the nitrogen cycle works, because we're going to basically try to build something that undoes the nitrogen cycle effectively, or sort of does the opposite of the nitrogen cycle. So what we call the nitrogen cycle is only one part of the full cycle. The cycle is start to finish. It comes back around to where it started. The part we're looking at in the aquarium, typically when we talk about the cycle, is just 1/3 of that cycle. The free nitrogen in the air has already been converted into nitrates that are in the plants. The plants ultimately, in one way or another, get eaten by the fish, whether it's made into fish food or whatever. The proteins the animals eat, and that proteins get converted into ammonia in your aquarium. And then that's where the cycle in our aquarium comes in, when the fish take the nitrogen from the atmosphere and put it into their water in the form of ammonia. And the ammonia gets oxidized rather than eaten. And then once it becomes nitrate, the nitrate gets oxidized. And then once that gets, it goes all the way down to nitrate. And then once it's nitrate, it's pretty much done and it's inert. And so to denitrify the tank, you have to sort of undo the process of, instead of adding the oxygens to the ammonia, you're removing, or adding them to the nitrogen, you're removing them. And the process requires different bacteria and, so on and so forth. And so you can't just set this up simply. It's got to be a system that's designed specifically for the purpose of taking that nitrate and turning it back into nitrogen gas, thus completing the full cycle where it goes back into the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. And so that's what I'm going to try to build, is the nitrate reactor that actually takes the nitrate from the tank and releases it back into the atmosphere as nitrogen gas, and then leaves the water going back into the tank with no nitrate in it. And again, the purpose is just to curiosity. It's not going to actually have a huge impact on what's going to happen in the tank, because we're going to build it on the pond. First of all, there's a couple reasons we're going to build it on the pond. The main reason being is that it's something I can build. It's going to be on the floor, lying right next to the pond. It's basically going to be a PVC pipe with pipes that go up and over the edge on the other side and go into the pond, so I won't be tripping over it or anything like that. All right, hang on. Swear to God, these sessions take forever to time out. The other reason we're going to set it up on the pond is because it's a readily available source of nitrate. And again, it's just going to be easy to work with. So the pond is heavily stocked. I got a lot of big koi and big fish in there. Lots of food goes in that tank. It produces a lot of nitrate. There's a lot of waste that builds up in that tank. And the nitrate reactor, if it functions properly, is only going to be processing a little bit of water at a time. It's going to be a very slow flow rate. The tube that's going to be going back in to, flow the water back into the pond is going to be like a little splashy, dribbly water coming back in. That's just not going to make enough difference to offset the amount of nitrate that's being produced in the pond. So I'm never going to get to where I notice a decrease in nitrate or anything like that in the pond. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it out of curiosity. Again, I want to see if I can build this in order to get it to work. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he set up some tubs, and one of them seems to sort of accidentally started denitrifying itself, and he's kind of mystified by it. And so he got the idea of building a nitrate reactor. And I am sort of stealing off of his idea, because I had always thought about building a tank that would sort of denitrify itself as building the whole tank from the ground up, under gravel filter, thick gravel bed, so on and so forth. I never thought about building an exterior reactor and then just attaching it to a tank. And so when he started talking about that, I was like, that would be pretty easy to do now that I'm thinking about it. And so that's what I'm going to do. The way it's going to be built is I'm going to have a slightly larger pipe coming from low down in the water down at the bottom of the tank. It's going to go up and over and outside down to the bottom. I'm probably going to have a 2 or 2.5 inch pipe that runs maybe 3 or 4 feet along the side of the, just lying on the floor over there. And then I'm going to have up and back over, and just at the top, it's just going to be a little fountain that flows into the surface of the water. It's not going to be underwater or anything. And that's where I was thinking about using the air stone to lift the water. And that little bit of water lift would be all that was going to be pulling new water in through that system. So the idea is, the way the nitrogen cycle works, as I very crudely just roughly explained, is a process that uses oxygen, the oxidizing of the ammonia and the oxidizing of the nitrite. That requires oxygen within the water. And so the denitrifying part of it requires a very low oxygen environment. The bacteria that does all the stuff, in the tank is aerobic bacteria. It's bacteria that lives in oxygen-rich water. We need anoxic bacteria. Anoxic is not quite anaerobic. I always get them confused. One is no oxygen in the water, and one is very, very little oxygen in the water. And I think anoxic is maybe anoxic is none. Anyway, we want the one where there's very little oxygen in the water, not none. And so what I'm going to do to set this thing up is I'm going to start by filling the down tube with gravel. The whole tube's basically just going to be filled with gravel. And as the water flows in and starts making its way down through the gravel, at first that water is going to be oxygen rich. It's going to have a lot of nitrate or ammonia or whatever. And that gravel in there will build up a bacterial load, just like in our filters, to process the ammonia and stuff and break it down into nitrite. But that process uses oxygen. Now, in our filters in our tanks, that water just goes right back into the tank and swirls around. But if that water is contained in something, that oxygen's not going to be replaced, and it's not going to be mixed with oxygen-rich water. And so as that water moves down and gets chemically treated, it uses up the oxygen, and eventually it's going to get to a point where it's used up most of the oxygen in the water. And then from there on down, all the rest of the space that the water is moving through is going to be that very oxygen poor environment. And if I can cultivate the bacteria in the oxygen poor section of it to grow the anoxic bacteria, or possibly anaerobic, again, I'm not sure which term is correct, then they will do the opposite. As the nitrate comes through, which has lots of oxygen attached to the nitrogen, they'll steal the oxygen off of that to use, and then they'll release the nitrogen just as free nitrogen gas. And there are some other gases, hydrogen sulfide being the main one, that could be produced by this process. But that would only really be a concern of mine, I think, if I was doing large quantities, like a wastewater treatment facility has to worry about excessive hydrogen sulfide and things like that. The amount of processing that I'm going to do, I just don't think is going to produce enough hydrogen sulfide that I'm even going to notice it. If you do notice it, hydrogen sulfide, if you didn't already know, is the gas that gives you the egg fart smell. That's why you get egg farts. There's a lot of sulfur in eggs, and when you eat them, your body produces hydrogen sulfide and you get that smell. So if I got a nitrogen reactor, a nitrate reactor that's producing a lot of hydrogen sulfide, that could be problematic. I don't necessarily want my basement smelling like egg farts all the time, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. But that's basically the process I'm going to go through. I'll just have to dial in how fast I can move the water through. If it turns out that the water loses its oxygen fairly quickly, and I have a long, 4-foot pipe full of gravel, I may be able to move the water through there a little more quickly and still achieve the same process. But the faster I move the water through, the more of that substrate is going to have aerobic bacteria living in it, and the longer the less time I'll have to denitrify it. I don't even know if this is going to work. In principle, it should. I understand the process. I understand the chemistry behind it. I understand the functionality of it and what I need to do. But I've done that a lot of times. I've had a lot of different things in my life and never been able to get them to work right or whatever. But I do think that I'm going to have success with this. It may take up to a year to really cultivate that bacteria and get the system dialed in or whatever. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. Again, I'm not concerned about denitrifying the tank. And the way we're going to check to see if it's even working is we're just going to take a sample of the outflow water. And if that's got less nitrate in it than the tank water, then we're taking nitrate out of it, because that's the only, it's going to go out one side through a little pipe and then right back into the tank. And if it's got less nitrate coming back in than it did going out, then my reactor will be Y. And so we're just going to see if that does anything. Now, having said all that, let me wrap up by saying, if you're thinking that's a great idea, I should try to build one of those for my tank. I've always wanted one of those tanks that's nitrate free and all that kind of stuff. I'll never have to do another water change again. Banish those thoughts immediately. I never do water changes because of nitrate. Every time I do a water change is for some other reason. It could be the tannin buildup. It could be simply I want to remineralize the tank, or it's just been a while. So what the hell? It's something to do. Maybe I want to clean the glass down. There's a lot of reasons that I'll do a water change, and none of them have anything to do with nitrate. And so let's say I built a reactor that was so efficient that it denitrified my pond. That's not going to change anything about how frequently I do water changes on that, because nitrate isn't the reason I do water changes. So if you are thinking about building something like this because you think it's going to be some magic bullet to never have to worry about water changes again, it's just really not. Again, the nitrate's just not why we do water changes. I've always said for years, the reason I've never put a lot of effort into developing or seeing if I could develop one of these nitrate absorbing, a nitrate free tank, is because why? It's just such not an issue. And if you really are concerned about nitrates, the easiest thing to do is just do a water change. You want to cut your nitrates in half, do a 50% water change. Bang. You cut your nitrate in half by a 50% water change. So it's not an issue. If it was an issue, you could just do the water changes. You're still going to have to do water changes, even if you do denitrify it. So I've just never really understood the whole fascination with trying to get this zero nitrate tank. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Curiosity, just my intellectual curiosity, I really want to just see if this works or not. And so if there's a simple way, a couple of pieces of PVC pipe and some glue and a water pump, all right, I'm down for that. I'm curious to see if I can do this, but I'm not going to set up a tank with an undergravel filter and deep sand bed and all that shit just to see if I can do it. If it serves some real function, maybe that might be worth the effort. But I'm not going to do all that and dedicate a whole aquarium just to see if I can get the nitrate to not be in there, because I don't care. This will be interesting, though. It'll be simple, inexpensive, and it'll give me something to shoot some videos about that I can post. We can all follow along and see if over time the nitrate level starts coming down, out of the outflow. As my friend said, what he's doing with his is he's going to set his up and let a fairly vigorous amount of water flow through it for a month or so, just to get a good microbial community going in all the gravel and everything that he's putting in his. And then once he's got some life in it, then he's going to start slowing it down and letting things sort themselves out, and letting the oxygen levels change slowly. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to, I'm not just going to start it at this slow run, although maybe I might do that, because if he's doing it the other way, that would be interesting to see if I did it with the slow run right from the beginning. So that's probably what I'll do. I'll set it up to where it's just burbling back into the pond, a few gallons an hour is all I'm going to move through it. And let's see what that does. Let's see what moving a few gallons per hour through there does at first. But tomorrow I'm going over to the Lowe's, and so I'll pick up the different bits of pipe. I may have to rethink it. It may take a little longer because I'm now going to have to think about how to do the pump. I may have to put the pump in the pond and push the water through it rather than pulling the water out the other end, which is how I intended on doing it. But I don't know how I would pull the water out with a pump unless I bought a special like inline pump or something like that, and I'm not doing that. I'll work with one of the small pumps I currently have, or I'll buy a really small pump. But I think we're probably going to have to push the water out of the tank and through the system rather than pulling it through the system with the bubble stone. So we'll see. All right, let me get caught up on some comments here, and then we'll start winding down for the evening. Oh, let's see. I was back here somewhere. I think Janice left me a stop sign way once upon a time back here. Did I miss it? Holy crap. There it is. I got a lot of catching up to do. That stop sign saved my life. Thank you, Janice. I never would have found my spot again. Let's see. I haven't seen Laura in forever. I know she's been busy at work. Got a sponge filter. Nice. That's usually my thought, Zini. If I'm going to put an air stone in it anyway, why not just put a sponge on it, and then I get the air stone plus some extra biological filtration. That's why I've got the um, the sponge filters on the goldfish tank. Is I'm putting air stones in there anyway. Why not just stick them to the back with some sponges attached, and boom, you got some extra filtration. Can't go wrong with that. Let's see. Yeah, that air pump is just well, the brand says Vibrant Life. I don't know if that's a Walmart brand, but it's just they make the small size for $10, and then for 14, it's basically the exact same thing. It's just a slightly larger version. It has two outlets on it, and this is for up to a 60-gallon. But I find that small one, it says it's for a 10 to 20-gallon tank, or like a 10 to 15-gallon tank. It moves a lot of air. I like, if you see what's in my, no, that's not the right one. Is it? Yeah, I think that's one of them. It is. Do you see the bubbles coming out of the 55 over there? That's one of the small ones here. Let me put some of this shit down and I'll show you. Let me double check to make sure that really is the right air pump, and I'm not using one of those Tetra pumps. Let's see. Yes. So that's one of those small ones. And that's the amount of air that's coming out of it. So, that's the little one, and that's in my 55. So this is the big one, and you can see I put the two lines into one in the T. But that's just as quiet. You cannot hear that thing running. So last time I looked at the Tetra Whisperer air pumps, which I've used for years, they were ridiculously priced. Like the little ones that I used to get for $10 were like $20, and the larger ones were upwards of $60 or $70 for the fucking, the large ones for these tanks. So you can get one for a 60-gallon tank for $14 at Walmart. More power indeed. Oh, let me see. Oh, look, there's another stop sign. I had to go all the way back to the first stop sign, Janice. Let's see. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to watch you at that wedding, Zini. Let me see. I'm just trying to get caught up. I got loads of comments here. Yeah, I definitely did away with the deep bed substrates. I listened to nonsense Father Fish spouts on about the deep bed substrates. Again, if you know my story, I had a whole conversation with Father Fish um, at length about how I was going to do it and blah, blah, blah. And he gave me all this advice on how to set this up. It'll change your life. You'll never keep fish the same way again. It didn't do fucking jack shit. So screw those deep bed substrates. I'm not bothering with any of that. Now, deep enough substrate is important, though. Again, depends on what you want in your tank and what kind of plants you're growing, but you need enough substrate that your plants have something to root into and hold on to and not fall over. And ideally, I think you should have at least maybe like an inch, because you want a place for detritus to go. You want a place for bacterial cultures to develop, and so on and so forth. So whether your tank's planted or not, I do recommend some substrate, like a loose gravel or something that water can move through a little bit, and you can get some, biological benefit from having the substrate in there. But beyond that, it just becomes redundant. You don't need 4 inches of substrate in there. It's not going to give you any more benefit than having 1 inch of substrate in there. It just takes up space and costs extra money. Yeah, there you go. There you go, Art. That'll be fine. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna get a one of those kind of lift pumps. I already have some, but I'll show you. Oh, look at that! I'm at the bottom. Hang on half a second. I'll go grab one of those pumps I was talking about. There's a difference in the types of power heads I use. Some are the power heads that have like the impeller, and then they have the fucking, open cage around it, and the water just flows and sprays and all that. And that's great. That's more what I think of as being a power head from a technical standard. But I have several of these. I'm just going to grab this one. This is a fucking big one. This is for like a real serious pond. But you can get smaller versions of these. Then they also have pumps that are like this, and you can get. I can take this off. I can open and close this valve. This, I think, rotates, and so I can spray it in any direction I want. So I would have to put something like this in the pond. And if you look at it, you can see this is, it gives you, like, this is for an outdoor pond. This thing moves some water. Let's see. It doesn't say. Yeah, it doesn't say on it. But something like this is what I have in this pond. And, when that water, I got the screen fully open and the water's flowing, it moves a lot of water. And this one would too. This would be a ridiculous amount of water moving through that thing. But something like this is what I'm going to need. So I'll put it in the water, and then I'll stick a vinyl hose onto the outlet. And then the vinyl hose can connect into the PVC that will then run it through the system. And then on the other end, I can just have like a little, up and over 90-degree over the lip, and just have the water come back down into the pond. But I'll use something like this. Again, I've either got smaller ones somewhere. I looked over here in my pile, and I got 3 substantial ones, but I don't see any small ones. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. I got a pile of air pumps on the floor. I got so much shit over here. I got all kind of bags of carbon and bags of bio balls and ceramic rings and O-rings, and if it's random oddball aquarium shit, I got a pile of it over there. All right. Yeah, I found both those stop signs. If you're wondering about the stop signs, Neil, I'm not sure what you were asking about. Those are for when I am caught up on comments and then I go start talking again. That allows me to go back and see where I left off. And that way I don't miss anybody's comment, and I don't have to spend 5 minutes trying to figure out whether I read that one already and scroll down until I get to, a comment I haven't seen before. And it's a pain in the ass. Those stop signs were Laura's idea a long time ago, and they've been really handy. Yeah, I didn't think you were. I was like curious as to what you were asking about. Wasn't really sure there. So, all right. Any last thoughts? I'm going to do my last little chunk of Hawaiian puff here. I put my bong behind the laptop. No wonder I couldn't find it. My mom used to say when I was a kid, and I long ago had to decide that she's not wrong. You'd forget your head if it wasn't attached, because I would. Rosie. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosie. I appreciate that. All right, that'll be my final bong hit for the night. Yeah, I've been thinking about you, Janice. I didn't want to bring it up. I figured if you weren't going to bring it up, I wasn't. But I have been thinking about you. So, there's nothing I can say. You got to do what you got to do. Things are going to be what they are, and you're just going to have to deal with it and get through it and all. But at least people are thinking about you. Arc Knight. No, I don't think I'm going to do 5 more hours. I will say if anybody has any legit questions they have. I ran over a lot of different stuff tonight. I talked about the working on the pond and the nitrogen cycle and the blah 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 and all that stuff. If you missed it in the beginning, I talked about getting the pond cleared up. I was having issues with that, and I kind of thought maybe I don't have enough gas exchange going on, so I put a big air stone in there, and the pond's already starting to clear up after a few days. So I do believe I sorted that issue out. What else was I going to talk about with the pond? I talked about the nitrate reactor. I don't know. There was something else about it. I think I might have seen one of those little minnows I put in my pond outside the other day. I looked in there and was looking around and I saw movement. And when I looked, I didn't see anything else, but I don't know what else would have been in there that would have been that large, that would have created that much. Insects don't move like that. It seemed like a little minnow dashing, as I walked up to the pond. Again, the outdoor pond, there's about this much water, and then there's about this much water lily covering the surface, and the fish just go swim underneath the water lily for shelter. And I think that's what the case was. There was a fish that was out, in the open water. And when I walked up, it scared it and it swam underneath the water lilies. And I think I saw it. So some of them do seem to be surviving. The only way you can reduce the guppy, and I've done this before, I did slowly take a tank that was just overflowing with guppies all the time. And whenever new guppies were born, I would let them get big enough that I could clearly see which ones were the males and which ones were the females. And I would just start separating them. I didn't always get them all, but I would just stay at it and stay at it. And eventually I created a sorority tank where I always put all the females in that tank. And it was my gourami tank. So if any of them were still pregnant and had more babies in the gourami tank, that wasn't my problem. That was free fish food. But slowly but surely, my guppy tank, I weeded all the females out and eventually was just left with a tank full of males. It took months, but eventually I got to having just a tank full of males and then a separate sorority tank with a bunch of females in it. You think $5 an hour seems reasonable? It is not. Well, not only do they have to be big enough to eat the fry, they have to be the kind of fish that will eat the fry. I've tried putting guppy fry in other tanks and then found out that the fish just don't eat the fry. And then I wind up with a bunch of guppies in that tank too. I did look at my latest. YouTube has started doing a thing where they actually show you the dollar value of how much each video has earned right next to the video. I don't have to like dig in through my analytics. I can just see that now. And my going down to the stream video did about what I expected it to do. Last I looked at it, it had almost 700 views on it. It was like 640 views or something. That was either this morning or last night. It's been a while. It might have 700 views by now. But it has earned me $1.64. So that's one of my high earning videos recently. Most of them are like 20 to 40 cents. I got a couple that are around 50 cents. But almost 1,000 views, and I might get, almost $2 out of that video. So not bad for 2.5 weeks worth of work. That's like $1 a week. So hopefully more people will watch it. But the other thing is the overall watch. I think it was like a 23-minute video or something, and the average watch time is like 6 minutes. So that's about typical. The average watch time for my live streams has gone up. Last time I looked, it was almost 14 minutes, which was pretty good. Usually it's 12, 11 minutes or something is the average watch time on my live stream. So 14 minutes, I must be getting more interesting. So there you go. No. Oh, here's the one last thing that I wanted to show you. I decided I was going to start a ulterior identity as a superhero. Doesn't that make the most wicked fucking skull face ever? It's actually the pelvis of a deer, though. That actually sits like this. That's where the leg bone, the socket would go. And then these big holes here in the bottom is where the nerves and bundles of veins, arteries, muscles come down through there and attach to the thigh down here. And then this area here would be like the birthing canal. And so that's how it would sit in the body. So based on its size, it's got to be a deer pelvis. There's nothing around here anywhere near the size that would produce a pelvis this narrow. That's almost cat size, but if that was a cat, it would have to be a fucking mountain lion. So it's got to be a deer. And I'm probably going to put it, I haven't washed it up yet. I just found it in this condition. So probably going to put it in with the goldfish. I already have a deer's femur in with the goldfish. And then I got some jawbones from a deer that I found over there. So I don't know why this is becoming a theme in my tanks, but it is. I find a lot of deer bones around here. There's a lot of deer die, and their carcasses get washed down into the streams, and I find bones all the time. And for whatever reason, if it's an interesting bone, I pick it up and bring it home. No, when I hold it up and look out through it with my face, these holes again are the holes that would be where the veins and the muscles and the nerves and stuff come down through it. The back end of the deer is back here on this end of it. So that's what I'm doing when I stick it on my face. Are you not entertained or what? Come on, where else do you get this kind of entertainment on a live stream on a Friday night? So if you're enjoying yourself, and I just see a bunch of people bailed out, so maybe the deer pelvis on the face might have been a step too far. But if you were enjoying the show right up until that point, make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell, all that good stuff. I typically do my live streams on Friday nights between 8 and 10 or thereabouts. Friday night, Sunday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. If you subscribe for $2.99 a month, you get a third live stream every month. I do a members only live stream on Wednesdays. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out too. So last thoughts, and then we will get out of here. And of course, I always appreciate tips, super chats, super thanks, whatever the kind of monetary thank yous that they offer here on YouTube. are always appreciated. And other than that, I don't know what to tell you. I do have now 266 miles on my bike. So I did some quick calculation with the gas, even calculating it at 350 a gallon. I've already saved enough in gas to pay for 20% of the cost of the bike, and that's in 2 months. So at the rate I'm going, by the end of the summer, I'll have paid for the bike just in gas savings alone. So I'm stoked, and I still really enjoy riding it around. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad you made it too, Zany. I've been thinking about you again. If I can find that GIF, whatever, it was a cat GIF, of course. I'll send it to you because I thought it was amusing. It's not that big a deal, but it was cute, so I'll send it to you. Let me see. Yeah, I use it all the time, Janice. I love riding it through town. I rode up this morning. I went up to the Walmart and got some stuff, and I had some other errands to run, like in town, but I was getting ice cream, and so I wanted to do that on its own thing. And so I went to Walmart and took care of that bullshit first. Came home, got the bike unloaded, and then I went out and then went down through town. And when I go through town, the speed limit's 25 and the bike does 21. And so if I can get off to the side of the road, I will, to let cars go by me. But if I got cars behind me, I really just don't sweat it. I just ride down the road just like I've got every right to be there. And they have to fucking go 21 miles an hour behind me, until I can get to where I can get off the road safely. But again, it's almost the speed limit anyway, so I'm not really inconveniencing anybody. But from there, I went down to we have a little joint that sells like crabs, and you can get steamed crabs today. They had a bunch of soft shell crabs. They've got amazing looking deviled eggs made with crab meat. Oh my God, they look so good. They're like $5 each. But they also they deal with the local dairy, and they have really, really good milk. And I just had a hankering for some chocolate milk. So I rode down there. I got some chocolate milk, took back a couple bottles that we had, got our deposits back. Went across the street. I hit the vape shop. I drove up to the ice cream store. I took my little cooler bag with me so I could put my ice cream in my freezer bag. And then I rode home. I came home like through the country. I drove home on the long way and just enjoyed the sights and whatnot. I put 10 miles on the bike just today riding around. And again, I wouldn't have had to go the long way, but most of the time, if I was doing that in my truck, I would have come home the scenic way anyway. So I would have driven that in my truck had I done that. So I'm counting that as miles saved. And again, I'm up to, I think I've saved like $65 in gas or $64 in gas so far. And that's in 2 months. So I'll get a video out there about it here pretty soon. I know I keep saying that. I got to be in the mood to do it, and it'll be a nice day, and I'll be like, oh, I'll have the bike on my mind, and I'll be all stoked about it, and I'll go shoot a really excited video. I'm just not going to force myself to go pretend I'm excited and shoot a video if I'm just not in the mood to do it. But I'll get it out there pretty soon, and if I get 300 miles on it, before I do it, I'll be able to really say I've put some miles on this bike. I can talk about numbers, and like I've saved $75 in gas, and that's encouraging if you're thinking about buying a bike to save money on gas. When somebody says in 2 months I've saved $75, that makes $350 maybe not sound so expensive anymore. So, all right, everybody, I'm going to call it good there and say good night. Get on with winding down. We got some errands and stuff to run tomorrow. Unfortunately, the errands are over in the big city of Westminster, and I can't get there on my bike. So we're going to take the car. But it's that time of year, so I might be coming home with some new plants here pretty soon. Not for the fish room or anything, but we always get a lot of good stuff at the end of the season when stuff starts going on clearance, at the Lowe's and the Walmart or whatever. Because again, just because it looks like shit now doesn't mean you can't put it in the ground and next spring have a gorgeous plant and we get it for $3 or $4. That's awesome. So we'll be getting some plants here pretty soon. I'm excited about that. Oh, that sucks, Janice. At least he didn't wreck. A lot of people panic when shit like that happens and then they wreck. Yeah, I watched a good video the other day about hybrid cars. They definitely don't work the way I thought they worked, and now I'm a little more interested in a hybrid than I used to be. But I'm still waiting until I can afford an all-electric vehicle. I don't want it to fuck with gasoline at all. I just want to be able to plug my car in, charge it up, and do my thing. If other people want to drive gasoline, that's their business. I would like to have an electric vehicle. Yeah, my professional driving instincts always kick in. If a bee flies in my window or something, I never panic. If I really do feel the need to pull over, I do so calmly when it's safe to do so. I would much rather get stung by a bee than fucking drive into a tree or oncoming traffic or something because I'm fucking flailing my arms about like an idiot. I see people do shit like that all the time. It drives me crazy. I don't want to hit squirrels and stuff when they're running across the street, but I'm also not going to swerve into oncoming traffic to avoid hitting a squirrel or slam my brakes on when I got somebody tailgating me. And I'm not going to cause an accident to avoid hitting a squirrel. I might swerve a little bit or slow down as best I can, but again, I keep my head in such a way. I see so many people do that. They just squirrel, they slam on their brakes and almost cause a fucking accident because they're trying not to hit a squirrel. Oh, well. Well, that depends on how much you drive. Or I've always been bothered by the one thing. I'm going to go on a little electric car rant here for a minute. Um, Not necessarily preaching to anybody to buy one. Again, drive whatever you want. I don't give a shit. But the one thing I hear people say a lot with the electric cars is they call it range anxiety. It's so common. It has a name. And people always say, oh, they only get 300 miles or they only get 250 miles. First of all, my truck, when it's full of fuel, only gets 390 miles. So it's okay. You know, but I think people think too much about the paradigm of gas stations and cars. We let our cars get relatively low on fuel and then we go and we fill it up because we don't like going to the fucking gas station. So we do it as infrequently as possible. But with an electric car, if you live in an apartment or something where you can't plug it in at night or whatever, that's different. But for somebody like me, I can just plug my car into I'd have to run a dedicated line to it, but I can just use my household plug and just plug it in. And it won't charge it like the fast charger does. And to go from zero to full would take about 3 days, literally. But I never drive. Well, I do have one day where I drive 175 miles, but most people drive about 40 miles a day. So if you start with a full charge, you go out, you drive, you maybe use 10, 15% of your charge, plug it in at night when you go to bed. And when you get up in the morning, you may not have topped it all the way off, but you'll have put a good amount of that back in there. And just when you get a chance to plug it in, let it sit there for 3 or 4 hours. When you're home on Saturday afternoon, just leave it plugged in and just let it get charging. The idea of having to go to a special place to top it off and then go back home, or you got to swing by somewhere because you're getting low and you got to fill it up, that's like fuel tank thinking. Batteries are just different. Just do it like I do it with my vape device. Oh, I got 84%, but I'm sitting here with the plug. I just plug it in and now it's 100%. Or it's 40%. Now it's 60%. I plugged it in for 15 minutes. Again, I get it. If you live in an apartment or something and you don't have access to being able to just plug your car in overnight or whatever, that's clearly a different story. But for a lot of people, they do have the option of just plugging it in. A lot of people park the car in garages overnight and yet still talk about range anxiety. You just plug your damn car in when you park it at night and recharge it. It's not a big deal. Like, people just make too much of a deal about the whole how far can you go on a single charge? How far do you need to go on a single charge? If you travel a lot, again, different scenario. Most people don't drive 300 miles a day. They're not traveling salesmen or regional managers where they have to go to stores all up and down the East Coast or whatever. Some people do. Electric cars probably aren't for them. I'd love an electric car. It would be great for me, except for one day a month. And even on that day, I would just have to stop somewhere and top off my charge a little bit at a station, and then I'd still be able to get through my day just fine. Yeah, well, again, that's a problem. Yeah, again, there are other issues with it, Neil. Again, it's not for everybody in every situation. And even here in America, we're getting to the point where you can charge a car from like 20% to 80% in 30 minutes or so, 25 minutes. So it's not much longer, or maybe it's even shorter than that now. And the Chinese company BYD can put a full charge on a car in 5 minutes. So the same time it takes to fuel a car, you can fully recharge the battery. So that technology exists. It's just not here yet. So these just aren't going to be issues with electric cars for the vast majority of people. Yeah, see, there you go, Kendra. How you doing, Kendra? I'm glad you were able to make it. I am getting out of here. I just went off on an electric car tangent for a minute. 58 miles per gallon. That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a rethinking of driving. And then when you think long term, if we invest in the infrastructure and parking garages, start making charging ports available and businesses where you work, you go to the Walmart, one of the things you can do is charge up while you're there because they got a little charging station over there. We need to break the idea of gasoline, gas station, having, once you don't think about it like that anymore, the options become you got a lot of options of shit you can do for electric vehicles. It's just we just won't for some reason, but that's a different video. I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, the regenerative braking is interesting. That was part of the video about the hybrids I was watching with the regenerative braking and all that kind of stuff. Again, the hybrid cars don't work at all like I used to think they did. And he started the video saying, this is probably how you think an electric car works, a hybrid car works, which of course was how, and it wasn't. And so I did find the hybrid thing interesting. I wish I had regen braking on my bicycle, except I know it's like a really cheapy budget electric bicycle. I'm glad I got the features I do on it. I think asking for regenerative braking is probably a bit much for a $400 bike. So, all right, everybody, we made it to 10:30 almost. That's much later than I thought I was going to go tonight. Let me see if I got any thing I need to look at right now. All right, no, I don't. All right. Oh, you're quite welcome, Janice. I hope you all enjoyed. And again, don't know when I'm actually going to build that reactor. Still got to work out a few details about how I'm going to get the water to flow through it. I got to pick up some supplies and stuff. But I am going to do a video documentary series of that. We're going to talk about it. We're going to build it. Again, all the stuff I went over tonight about why I'm doing it, how it's not really going to make any difference. I just don't want people doing this thinking this is some kind of solution to something or this is going to be some sort of benefit, or it's just not. It just really isn't. It's going to be interesting to do, and it's going to prove to me once and fucking for all whether this will work. Again, I know it works because I know how wastewater facilities work, and they denitrify water using similar methods because it works. But until I've done it, I just won't be satisfied with knowing like I did that, So that's the only reason I'm doing it. It's not serving any purpose. It's not going to make my tank healthier. It's just a curiosity, just academic curiosity. But it will be a fun experiment to do to see if we can do it. And then again, like I said, if it works in principle and I can get the functioning design to work, it's adaptable. You could change it and modify it. And again, if you were putting this on something that wasn't a heavily stocked tank and you didn't feed a lot, you could probably achieve that 0 nitrate and mythical, like whatever. But again, don't see any point in doing that. But if that's your goal, maybe we might be able to figure out a way to do that. So, all right, everybody. Thank you guys for hanging out. And as far as I know, I will see you all on Sunday, unless, something comes up or I don't feel like it. But otherwise, I will see you all then. Thanks for hanging out and good night.